No, not again! I have to get there! The dog cannot be treated here. It's against protocol.
They told her to leave it outside. It's just a stray dog, the charge nurse said.
The decision is final. There will be no further discussion.
This is a human ER. But the rookie nurse saw the blood pumping through its ribs and knew it had minutes left to live. So she broke the rules. She knelt on the cold ambulance bay floor and used hospital supplies to save it, knowing she could lose her job for it. An hour later, 3 silent men in tactical gear walked into the ER and asked one question that changed everything. Who treated our K9? Because that stray dog was a Special Forces combat veteran, and the hospital had just refused him care. Before we continue, tell me in the comments, would you have followed protocol or saved the life in front of you? And if you love realistic medical stories like this, hit subscribe now, because what happens next will completely change how this hospital sees that rookie nurse forever. At 2 a.m, Lakeview Regional's emergency department moved with a quiet, mechanical rhythm that never truly slowed, only shifted into a lower gear. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, flattening everything into the same sterile brightness. Monitors beeped in irregular patterns, stretchers rolled across polished floors, and the air carried the faint, permanent scent of antiseptic layered over old coffee. Clara Jennings stood near the medication station with a clipboard tucked against her chest, reading the same chart for the 3rd time, not because she needed to, she already knew the patient's orders, but because standing still without looking busy invited attention. And attention inside this ER rarely meant anything good. She was 5 months into her first job since passing her boards. 5 months of night shifts, short breaks, and the quiet understanding that she was still being watched, still being evaluated. Lakeview Regional wasn't a teaching hospital, but it had a reputation for running like one, fast, unforgiving, and deeply hierarchical. The charge nurse, Vanessa Holt, stood at the central desk reviewing staffing numbers on a tablet. She had the kind of voice that never rose above calm, but carried a sharpness that cut cleanly. When she spoke to Clara, it was usually accompanied by a sigh. Not dramatic, not openly hostile, just tired enough to suggest she was perpetually disappointed. "Jennings," Vanessa said now, without looking up, "you're hovering again." Clara shifted her weight immediately, just reviewing Room 12's discharge instructions. Vanessa glanced over briefly, eyes moving from Clara's badge to her posture, then back to the tablet. "You reviewed them 20 minutes ago." Clara nodded. "Yes, ma'am." Vanessa didn't reply. She rarely did, after correcting her. The silence itself was the message. Across the department, Dr. Martin Kessler stepped out of a trauma bay, stripping off his gloves as he walked. He was a precise man in his early 50s, known for being calm, under pressure, and intolerant of inefficiency. His movements always seemed economical. No wasted steps, no unnecessary conversation. He passed Clara without acknowledging her, stopping instead at the desk to speak with Vanessa in a low, controlled voice about bed availability and incoming EMS alerts. Clara had learned quickly that this wasn't personal. Dr. Kessler barely spoke to any of the junior nurses unless there was a direct clinical need. Still, it left her existing in a strange in-between space. Present, necessary, but invisible. She watched him for a moment as he signed off on a chart. His pen moved with quick, decisive strokes. He didn't hesitate, didn't double-check. He trusted his decisions completely. Clara wondered what that felt like, to be certain enough in your role that no one questioned whether you belonged there. She had come from a small community college nursing program an hour south. She hadn't trained at a prestigious university hospital or rotated through elite trauma centers. She didn't have family connections in medicine. She'd arrived at Lakeview with a single recommendation letter, a solid GPA, and a quiet determination to work harder than anyone expected. But effort didn't erase perception. In the first month alone, she'd been called green more times than she could count. Not cruelly, just casually. the way people use the word when discussing something not yet fully formed. Even now, she could feel it in the way assignments were given. She handled stable patients, discharges, routine monitoring. The
Blood work is
predictable
back. Weight
work
count
that
is
kept the
elevated.
department
Start
running
broad
but
spectrum
rarely drew
antibiotics
attention.
and monitor vitals.
She understood the system. You proved yourself slowly over time through consistency rather than boldness. You learned when to speak and when silence was safer. You followed protocol, always protocol. Clara adjusted her ponytail and glanced at the large digital clock mounted above the nurse's station. 2:50 a.m. The quiet hour when the ER often held its breath. Not calm, exactly, but suspended, like a pause between waves. She didn't know yet that within minutes, that pause would end. And that for the first time since she'd started at Lakeview Regional, she would have to decide whether following protocol mattered more than following instinct. At 2:51 a.m., the quiet in the ambulance bay broke all at once. The metal doors slammed open with a loud bang that echoed through the ER. Clara looked up from the supply cart just as a security guard stumbled inside, breathing hard. He was dragging something heavy across the concrete floor. At first, she thought it was a large duffel bag. Then it moved. A low, weak sound came from it. Not a growl, not a bark. More like a breath that hurt to take. Clara stepped closer. It was a dog. A large Belgian Malinois, its tan coat dark with blood along one side. Deep cuts ran across its ribs. One hind leg hung at a strange angle, barely touching the ground. The dog's chest rose and fell fast, shallow and uneven. The guard let go and wiped sweat from his face. "Found him out by the parking lot," he said, still catching his breath. "Thought he was dead at first." Vanessa turned from the desk and walked over, already shaking her head. "No," she said flatly before anyone asked. "We don't treat animals here. Call animal control." The guard frowned. "I tried. Nobody answered." "It's 3 a.m, Vanessa replied. "Leave a message." Clara didn't move. She stayed where she was, looking at the dog's side. Blood was still seeping through the fur. She could see the slow pulse of it, each breath pushing more out. That meant one thing. The bleeding hadn't stopped. Dr. Kessler passed by on his way back to the trauma rooms. He glanced down for only a second. Then he kept walking. "This is a hospital," he said calmly over his shoulder. "Not a vet clinic." Clara felt her hands tighten at her sides. She knew the rule. Everyone did. Only human patients could receive care in the ER. Supplies were tracked. Every item used had to be logged. Every action had to match policy. Breaking that rule could mean a write-up. Too many write-ups could mean losing your job. Vanessa crossed her arms. "Security can move it back outside," she said. "We'll wait for animal control." Clara looked at the dog again. Its eyes were open. Not wild, not angry, just tired. It didn't try to move, didn't snap, didn't even make a sound. It just watched her. The bleeding grew heavier with each breath. Clara knew what that meant too. Time, not hours, minutes. She swallowed, slowly. Her training ran through her mind like a checklist. Control bleeding, protect airway, prevent shock. The same steps, no matter who or what was on the floor. Vanessa noticed her hesitation. "Jennings," she said sharply. "Step away." Clara didn't answer right away. She knelt down anyway. The concrete floor was cold through her scrubs as she reached for the supply closet nearby. Behind her, she heard Vanessa let out a long, tired sigh. "Don't do this," the charge nurse said quietly, but Clara was already pulling out gauze. Clara didn't rush. She moved the way she had been trained, steady, careful, and quiet. First, she slid a folded towel under the dog's head to keep its airway clear. The animal didn't fight her. It barely moved at all, only letting out a slow breath that trembled as it left its chest. "Easy," she whispered, more out of habit than expectation. "I've got you." From the supply cart, she pulled a stack of thick gauze pads and a bottle of saline. Behind her, Vanessa's voice stayed calm, but there was no patience left in it. "Jennings," she said, "you are misusing hospital supplies. Stop now." Clara didn't turn around. She soaked the gauze with saline and began cleaning the largest wound along the ribs. Blood washed away in dark streaks, revealing a deep cut that ran several inches across the dog's side. The bleeding picked up the moment the pressure lifted. Clara pressed fresh gauze down firmly. Her hands didn't shake. She had learned early that panic only made bleeding worse. At the nurse's station, a printer hummed to life. Vanessa walked over, pulled a sheet of paper from it, and returned to the bay. She didn't kneel. She didn't argue. She simply placed the paper on the floor beside Clara. The bold header at the top read, "Incident Report, Staff Conduct." Clara saw it in her peripheral vision, but kept working. She layered more gauze, then wrapped a compression bandage tightly around the rib area. The dog flinched once, but didn't try to pull away. Instead, it slowly lowered its head until it rested against Clara's knee. The weight surprised her. It trusted her. That made her work even more carefully. Dr. Kessler walked past again, reviewing a chart as he moved. He paused for only a moment when he saw the bandages. "This ends now," he said calmly. "We have human patients waiting." Clara nodded once without looking up. "Yes, doctor." But she didn't stop. She moved to the hind leg next. The limb was badly cut but not fully broken. She checked for pulse near the paw, feeling carefully through the fur. Weak, but still there. That meant the leg could still be saved. She flushed the wound with saline, packed it with gauze, and wrapped it in a firm pressure bandage. Minutes passed, then more. The ER kept moving around her. Stretchers rolling, phones ringing, voices calling out orders. But none of it reached her focus. She stayed on her knees the entire time. By the end of the first half hour, her scrubs were streaked with blood. Her legs ached from kneeling on concrete. Her fingers were stiff from constant pressure. Still, she didn't stop, because the bleeding had finally begun to slow. She could see it now. Each breath no longer pushed out a fresh wave. The dog's breathing was still fast, but it was deeper than before, more stable. Clara let out a quiet breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Behind her, Vanessa picked up the incident report and set it back down more firmly beside her. "Last chance," she said. Clara didn't look at the paper. She just adjusted the bandage one more time and kept her hands steady over the wound. Time moved slowly in the ambulance bay. The clock above the doors clicked forward 1 minute at a time, each second stretching longer than the last. Clara stayed on her knees beside the dog, her hands never leaving the bandages for more than a few seconds at a time. Bleeding control was never a one-time fix. It was constant work. Pressure, check, adjust, press again. She could feel warmth soaking through the layers of gauze under her palms. She changed the top pads often, replacing them before they became too heavy with blood. The dog never tried to bite, never growled. It only watched her with tired, steady eyes. Every so often it let out a soft breath that trembled at the end like it was trying to hold itself together. Clara spoke to it quietly, without thinking. "Stay with me," she whispered once while tightening the wrap around its ribs. "Just a little longer." Inside the ER, the night shift went on as if nothing unusual was happening. A stretcher rolled past the open bay doors. Someone called out for lab results. A phone rang at the nurse's station. Life or death work continued only a few feet away, but none of it included the animal on the floor. Vanessa stepped into the bay twice during that hour. Both times she stopped near the doorway, arms crossed. Both times she watched in silence for several seconds. Then she walked away without speaking. The incident report stayed on the floor beside Clara, its edges curling slightly from the damp air. Clara didn't look at it again. She already knew what it meant. A formal write-up would go into her file. Too many of those could end her career before it really started. But every time that thought rose in her mind, she looked at the dog's breathing. Still shallow, still weak, still fighting, and the decision became simple again. She pressed harder on the bandage when she felt a fresh pulse of bleeding underneath. Her arms began to ache. Her lower back burned from kneeling. Her hands felt numb from the steady pressure. But she didn't shift position. She didn't stand. She didn't stop. Around 3:40 a.m., the dog finally moved more than a breath. Its head lifted slightly from her knee, then lowered again, settling more comfortably against her leg. Its breathing slowed, not normal yet, but steadier. Clara noticed the change immediately. The bleeding had slowed to a slow seep instead of a steady flow. That meant one thing. It had survived the worst part. She let out a long, quiet breath and leaned back, just enough to rest her arms for a few seconds. For the first time in nearly an hour, she looked up. The ambulance bay was still empty, except for her and the dog. The ER doors slid open and shut in the distance as staff moved inside. Everything looked normal, calm, routine. And then, at 3:55 a.m., the bay door slammed open again. This time, the sound was louder, sharper, the kind of sound that made people look up before they even knew why. Clara turned toward the
Team, move
entrance.
out. Stay frosty.
3 men walked
Copy
in.
that. Left flank
They
clear.
moved
Right flank
quickly,
secure.
but
Moving.
without panic. No uniforms,
Team, move
no
out. Stay
visible
frosty.
badges,
Copy
just
that.
dark,
Left flank
tactical
clear. Right
clothing,
flank secure.
and
Moving.
the quiet, controlled posture of people
Team, move out.
used to being obeyed without explanation. The lead man didn't slow down. He walked straight past the nurse's station, past Vanessa, and went directly to Clara. The lead man stopped beside Clara and dropped to one knee without saying a word. He didn't ask permission. He didn't explain who he was. He just focused on the dog. Clara noticed the details right away. The way he moved, slow, controlled, and careful not to startle the animal. The way his eyes scanned the bandages, the gauze layers, and the wrap placement like he was reading a map. He wasn't guessing. He understood exactly what he was looking at. He gently pressed 2 fingers near the edge of the rib bandage, checking for fresh bleeding underneath. Then he shifted his hand lower to feel along the dog's leg wrap. His face stayed calm the entire time, but his jaw tightened slightly. Clara could see it. He knew how close the injuries had been to killing the dog. Behind him, the other 2 men stood still, near the bay doors. They didn't speak. They watched the room with quiet attention, as if they were measuring everything in it. Vanessa stepped forward at last, her voice firm. "Sir, you can't be back here. This area is restricted." The man didn't look up. He finished checking the bandage tension first. Then he sat back on his heel and finally raised his eyes to Clara. They were steady and sharp. "Who did this?" he asked calmly. His voice was low, but it carried across the bay. Clara wiped her hands on a clean gauze pad before answering. "I did." He studied her for a moment, not judging, not surprised, just taking in the information. Then he nodded once, a small, clear motion that said he understood exactly what that meant. Behind him, one of the other men stepped closer and crouched beside the dog's head. He placed a hand gently on the animal's neck, his expression softening just slightly. The dog's ears twitched at his touch. It tried to lift its head again. "Easy, boy," the second man murmured quietly. That was the first time anyone had called the dog anything other than it. Vanessa took another step forward, frustration rising in her voice now. "Sir, you need to step away. Animal control has been contacted. This is not a treatment case." The lead man finally stood. He was taller than Clara had realized from his kneeling position. His presence seemed to fill the space around him without any effort. He turned slowly toward Vanessa, and for the first time, his voice carried a different weight. "This isn't an animal control case," he said. He paused just long enough for every person in the bay to feel it. Then he added quietly, "This dog has a name." The man's voice stayed calm, but every word landed with weight. "His name is Aries," he said. The ambulance bay went quiet. Even the noise from inside the ER seemed to fade for a moment. The second man beside the dog nodded, still keeping a steady hand on the animal's neck. "He's ours," he added softly. Clara looked between them, trying to understand what that meant. The lead man continued. "Military working dog," he said. "3rd Special Forces Group, Fort Bragg." Vanessa blinked, caught off guard. "That's not possible," she said quickly. "He was found in the parking lot." The lead man didn't react to her tone. "Our transport vehicle broke down on I-95 about 4 hours ago," he explained. "During the transfer, he got loose. We've been searching since." He looked back down at the bandages on Aries. Looks like he didn't make it far. Clara felt a small knot tighten in her chest at those words. 4 hours. That meant the dog had been bleeding for a long time before anyone found him. The third man, who had stayed near the doors, spoke into a small radio clipped to his vest. Target located, he said quietly. Condition stabilized. His voice was calm, but there was relief in it. A few seconds later, the ambulance bay doors opened again. This time, a woman walked in wearing a dark uniform with a rank patch on her shoulder. She moved with purpose, her posture straight and controlled. She didn't look at anyone except the dog. Aries, she said softly as she approached. The dog's ears twitched again at the sound of her voice. She knelt beside him and ran her hand gently along his neck, checking his breathing. Then she stood and turned toward the staff. Her eyes stopped on Dr. Kessler first, then Vanessa. "I'm Sergeant Major Lawson," she said evenly. "Special Operations Command Liaison." No one spoke. Her tone wasn't loud, but it carried authority that didn't need volume. "This dog is a federally registered military asset," she continued, "valued at $65,000. He has completed 3 combat deployments." She paused. "And according to what I'm seeing here," she added, "he received no official aid from this facility." Her gaze shifted slowly to Clara. Except from one nurse. The silence in the bay deepened. Vanessa's arms lowered slightly at her sides. Dr. Kessler said nothing. The sergeant major continued, her voice steady. "I will need security footage from this area," she said, "and a written summary of staff actions from the time he was brought in." She didn't phrase it like a request. One of the men stepped forward carrying a compact medical bag. He moved quickly, but calmly, kneeling beside Aries the same way Clara had. "Team medic," he said briefly, as he opened the kit. He didn't ask Clara to move away. Instead, he nodded toward the bandages. "Walk me through what you did." Clara wiped her hands once more on a clean pad. "I cleaned the rib wound first," she said, "packed it with gauze, wrapped compression tight to slow bleeding. The medic peeled back only the outer layer of gauze, careful not to disturb the packing beneath." He gave a small nod. "Good pressure placement," he said. He checked near the edge of the wound, then gently felt along the dog's side. "This cut runs close to an artery," he said calmly to the room. "Another 30 minutes without compression. He bleeds out." The words hung in the air. Vanessa's face tightened slightly. Dr. Kessler shifted his weight but remained silent. The medic moved to the hind leg next, inspecting the wrap. "Circulation still present," he said. "Wrap's firm but not cutting flow." "That's correct." He looked back at Clara. "You kept him stable," he said simply. Not praise, just a clear professional statement. But in the quiet of the bay, it carried more weight than a long speech. The sergeant major nodded once at that. She turned to Dr. Kessler. "Your staff refused care for this asset," she said evenly. "One nurse did not." Her eyes moved toward the floor. She noticed the incident report lying beside Clara. She bent down, picked it up, and read the header. Her expression did not change. One of the operators stepped closer and held out his hand. She passed him the paper. He glanced at it briefly, then handed it to the lead man. The lead man folded the report once, slowly and neatly, and slipped it into his pocket. No one stopped him. No one said a word. He turned back toward Clara and held her gaze. "That write-up," he said quietly, "doesn't exist anymore." The ambulance bay stayed quiet after the lead man spoke. No one argued. No one tried to take the folded report back. The sergeant major stepped closer to Dr. Kessler now. Her voice stayed calm, but firm. "I will need a copy of this facility's incident policy," she said, "and the names of all staff present during this event." Dr. Kessler nodded once. "Of course," he said. His tone had changed. It was still professional, but there was no distance in it now. Vanessa remained near the doorway, her arms lowered at her sides. She didn't speak. She simply watched. The medic finished checking the bandages and nodded to the team. "We can move him," he said. "Careful lift." 2 of the operators stepped forward immediately. They worked together smoothly, sliding a transport board under Aries without shifting the pressure wraps. Clara instinctively placed one hand near the rib bandage to keep it steady while they lifted. For a moment, the dog's eyes met hers again. They were clearer now, more aware. As the team lifted him, Aries' head turned slightly toward her, even as the medic supported his neck. He didn't make a sound. He just watched her. The lead man noticed. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, round object. He placed it gently into Clara's hand. It was heavy for its size. Bronze, a challenge coin. One side carried the crest of the 3rd Special Forces Group. The other showed the silhouette of a working dog. Clara stared at it for a second, unsure what to say. The man spoke quietly. "You stayed with your patient," he said. He didn't add anything more. He didn't need to. The team carried Aries toward the doors. The sergeant major followed, pausing only once near Dr. Kessler. "Your nurse made the correct call tonight," she said. Then she walked out. The ambulance bay doors closed behind them. For a long moment, no one moved. The ER sound slowly returned. Phones ringing, footsteps, distant voices. Dr. Kessler finally turned toward Clara. He looked at the blood on her scrubs, the empty gauze wrappers on the floor, and the coin still in her hand. "You should clean up," he said quietly. It wasn't a reprimand. It sounded more like recognition. Vanessa said nothing at all. She simply picked up a trash bag and began gathering the used supplies from the floor. 3 days later, the night shift at Lakeview Regional looked the same as it always did. The lights hummed, monitors beeped, nurses moved quickly between rooms. But something had changed. Clara noticed it in small ways first. No one sighed when she stepped near the desk. No one double-checked her work out loud. When she asked for supplies, they were handed to her without hesitation. The biggest change came during morning report. Dr. Kessler stood at the front of the room, reviewing staffing updates. His voice was steady, as always. "Before we begin," he said, "there's one personnel note." He held up a single sheet of paper. "Clara Jennings has been recommended for the Trauma Nursing Development track," he said, "effective next month." A few nurses glanced toward her. No one clapped. No one made a scene. But several gave her small nods of approval. That was enough. Later that shift, Clara found an official envelope in her locker. The return address read, United States Special Operations Command. Inside was a formal letter. It thanked her by name for exceptional emergency intervention that preserved the life of a military working asset. It was signed by a colonel. There was no mention of the hospital staff, no mention of the incident report, just the facts. Clara folded the letter carefully and placed it back inside the envelope. She didn't show it to anyone. That same afternoon, Vanessa's name quietly disappeared from the charge nurse schedule. She was reassigned to a non-supervisory role on day shifts. No announcement was made, no explanation was given. The write-up report never appeared in Clara's file, and no one ever mentioned it again. One evening, near the end of the week, Dr. Kessler stopped beside Clara as she finished charting. "You stayed with him," he said simply. Clara shook her head slightly. "It wasn't a patient," she replied. "Doctor." Kessler looked at her for a moment. Then he said quietly, "Yeah." He paused. "It was." Clara didn't answer. That night, when she got home, she placed the bronze challenge coin in her bedside drawer. She didn't display it, didn't tell anyone about it. But sometimes, before sleep, she opened the drawer just to see it there. A quiet reminder that doing the right thing didn't always come from following rules. Sometimes it came from knowing when to stay on your knees and refuse to walk away. Before you go, I want to ask you something. If you had been in Clara's place that night, would you have followed the rules and walked away? Or would you have stayed, knowing it might cost you your job? And one more question. Do you think hospitals should ever make exceptions in emergencies, even when policy says no? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I read them all. If this story stayed with you, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and tap the bell so you don't miss the next one. You can also share this with someone who believes compassion still matters in high-pressure places like hospitals. There are more stories waiting on your screen right now. Watch those next, and I'll see you tomorrow at the same time with a brand new video.